Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deb Uber, the Education Coordinator for the Embryo Adoption Awareness Center. We are excited to have you all here today, and we're pleased to bring you the webinar titled Snowflakes Beating the Odds. We have 3 lovely families joining us tonight to share their personal embryo adoption stories and their experience adopting either 2PN or day 3 embryos. Just so you're aware, if this language is kind of new for you, 2PN and day 3 refer to the stage of the embryo as they're labeled by a clinic and can often be used to define the quality of a particular embryo. Both 2PN and day 3 embryos are some of the earliest stages that an embryo can be frozen at. So before we get started tonight, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation using the questions you submit through the Q&A feature. You may submit your questions at any time during the session, and we will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A panel in the lower right-hand portion of the screen, type your question into the dialog box, and click the send button. If you happen to be in the full screen view, you can click on the question mark icon in the toolbar in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This will open up the Q&A panel on your screen only. When you submit your question, it will be visible to all of the panelists, but not visible to other attendees. We expect this presentation to last approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes for Q&A. We will be distributing a copy of today's presentation and a list of all of the answers to any questions submitted today during the webinar. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation, please contact WebEx Technical Support at 866-229-3239. And just as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. So tonight we are joined by 3 families. Angela and Brian Cartledge will be sharing first tonight, and then we also have Josh and Kirsten and Terry and Jason Barbero. Each of these families have experience adopting either 2PN or day 3 embryos, and they're each going to be telling you a little bit more about themselves, so I'll leave that up to them. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Angela and Brian. After entering the Snowflakes program, Angela and Brian became the adoptive parents of day 3 embryos, and so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
No problem.
We actually started our journey about 13 years ago. We went through about 10 years of unexplained infertility, and then went through a couple of rounds of Clomid, went through a few rounds of intrauterine insemination or IUI, and finally settled on acupuncture and was working with acupuncture when I went to my OBGYN and said, this is what we're doing, should I be doing anything else? And he suggested that we join into an embryo study at the time, an IVF study. And as a result of the IVF study, we had 2 pregnancies. Both were one resulted in a live birth, but our son unfortunately was born with a very rare birth defect, and he passed away at 9 months old. And then we did a second in vitro a year later after he passed, and that pregnancy resulted in a miscarriage at 12 weeks. So we've never been pregnant outside of in vitro, and then after we lost that second child, we decided that we would actively pursue live birth adoption. When my our sister-in-law, came to us and let us know that embryo adoption was an option, and we had never heard of it before, so we were really excited about the possibility of being able to carry our own children, but carry our adoptive children, but still be able to reduce our risk of genetic anomalies like we had with our first 2 pregnancies. So that was how we got to this point of adopting our embryos. And then do you want to talk about what happens next?
Well, yeah. So where we ended up, when we were really struggling with the adoption, the live adoption process, and so we were both just really happy when this idea of embryo adoption came up. And we really didn't know much about staging. We really weren't worried about it. This would be our third IVF cycle, just with different, with embryos that were not our own genetic material. And so we just went right in and thought, we really want to make sure we have a successful pregnancy after the losses we'd already experienced. So we had talked amongst the two of us about maybe implanting 2 to 3 embryos. And on the day of the procedure, the embryologist said, well, here are the 2 embryos we're going to insert. And we said, well, maybe you could throw a third one in there just to increase our success rate. And the embryologist was very clear that there was no benefit to an additional embryo, that the chances of a successful birth were very good and very high, and not significantly higher with 2 embryos. So we went with that option. And that worked out really well for us, because 8 weeks later at the ultrasound, we had 3 heartbeats on the monitor all at the same time. And that was quite a shock for everybody that happened to be in the room. So we were really, really overjoyed. So we're really glad we didn't put that 3rd embryo in.
I think too that the key that we found was that when we actually got matched through Snowflakes, we adopted 15 day 3 embryos, so that we had a large number of day 3 embryos. And when we grew them out, there were 6 that were really viable. So we then took those, we took the 2 best, obviously, and then we transferred those, which then one split and became our 3 bundles of joy. And then from there, we had the 4 that were left over, and we actually put those back into the adoptive pool with Snowflakes so that someone else could adopt those 4. And they were already at day 5, but once they were rethawed, unfortunately, they didn't make it far enough for someone for them to be transferred again. So we really actually benefited from the day 3 embryos more so, unfortunately, than the next adoptive family did at day 5. But yeah, we were completely shocked to be having triplets when we were assured that 2 would give us either 1 or 2 healthy babies. So yeah, we have our triplets were born in February of 2013, and they were a girl and 2 boys. The boys are identical twins, and we are just thrilled beyond all comprehension and so blessed that we have healthy babies. Like we said, our main concern was just that we didn't have the ability to make healthy babies ourselves, and this was a really amazing and blessed way for me to carry our own babies and for us to be able to bring them home immediately as ours. That's them. That's the crazy 3. Brenton is our daughter, and then the boys are Henry and Charlie, and they are like the slide says, 2.5 years old, and they are perfectly developed and perfectly healthy. And as we were joking before the webinar started, they are perfect 2.5-year-olds that are currently jumping on their mattresses in their bedroom right now and attempting to climb out of their cribs. So really exciting stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's funny. They probably are jumping up and down on the bed. So thank you so much for sharing you guys' story. I just love seeing the pictures of your kids playing. It's so awesome. So next up, we're going to get started with Josh and Kirsten. Let me unmute them really quickly. They actually adopted a combination of 2PN and day 3 embryos after entering the Snowflakes program. So I'm just going to let them share their story.
Okay, so I'm Kirsten. Josh and I got married in the summer of 2009, and we decided to start trying to have a family right away because we both knew that we wanted a big family. But within a couple months, I started having hot flashes and getting really sick. So we went to the doctor, and I found out that I have primary ovarian insufficiency, which is almost just like premature menopause and pretty unpleasant. So they told us we had about a 5% chance of ever getting pregnant on our own. So we started looking at different forms of adoption then. We knew that we wanted to pursue a form of adoption where there was a big need. We felt that often there were waiting lists for infants, that there are people out there to adopt infants. So we looked at both foster care and snowflakes. I'd actually heard about snowflakes that focus on the family back in 2005, so we'd always kind of known about it. So we started looking at that, and then about 6 months later, I did get pregnant, which was a shock, and it was great. But I miscarried at 9 weeks, which was fairly devastating, just to hear bad news and then good news and then bad news again. So we kind of figured that was probably our 5% chance, and that was over. So we spent the next couple of years saving up for adoption, and then we started our home study in 2012. We took a long time to finish our home study because we were busy, but as soon as we finished it and we handed it in, we actually got matched with a family within a week, which was pretty exciting after waiting for a few years at that point. So the very first family we were matched with, we loved them. They had a great family history. We didn't know a whole lot about different stages of embryos. We knew that a lot of times even technically lower quality embryos do just fine and they become babies. So we decided we were just going to look for a family that had a lot of embryos because we wanted a large family. And then we're going to leave the rest up to God. So we got matched with a family that has 16 embryos. And so we figured you could probably have a pretty good family with that. So we did our first transfer in September of 2013. We saw 3 embryos, and one of the embryos didn't make it. And it was pretty reassuring when we went to actually do the transfer. Every doctor and embryologist we saw actually commented on how healthy our embryos looked, so that was pretty exciting. So they transferred it. We found out 2 weeks later that we were pregnant. We did find out that only one of the 2 that were transferred made it. The pregnancy was progressing normally. The baby was growing right at the size the baby should have been. But then we found out at our 11-week appointment that the baby had died. So we had a D&C, and we were told to wait 3 months before trying again. They actually wanted us to do genetic testing to find out why the baby died, but we decided not to do that because when we adopted the 16 embryos, we were committed to these little beings. So no matter what the genetic testing would have told us, we would have continued anyway. So we opted not to do that. So we waited 3 months, and then in March of 2014, we did another transfer. We thawed out 4 embryos, and 2 didn't make it this time. And again, the doctors all commented on how good the embryos looked, so that was encouraging again. And this time the pregnancy progressed very normally. Only one of the embryos made it, but that embryo was looking very good. At my 20-week ultrasound, we started noticing I had a heart-shaped uterus, and that was starting to cause problems. So our baby had a little bit of growth restriction. She wasn't growing quite as fast as she should have, and there was the danger that I could go into labor early. Actually, none of that ended up being an issue, but it did cause for a lot of doctor's appointments and a little bit of stress, but all of that ended up being okay. At about 30 weeks pregnant, my blood pressure started going up, and so I was actually induced at 32 weeks for preeclampsia. And so our baby was born at 3 pounds, 3 ounces. She was tiny. She was 2 months early, but she was very healthy for how old she was.
And basically, as soon as she was born, they swept us right out of the room, which was not in my plans because I figured I'd want to be in the room with Kirsten still, but the hospital was pretty clear on daddy goes with the baby. So she was definitely born with a healthy set of lungs and was screaming her head off the whole way. And she ended up staying in the NICU for a month, a little over a month or so, and just figuring out how to eat. And, they had her in some really massive machines, and she had a CPAP for a little while, so it was very hard to just see her go through that. But she she took it like a champ and was just, just progressing better and better every day, even faster than I think some of the doctors thought she would be progressing. And now she's, it took about 4 months to get off oxygen, but that's not necessarily uncommon when you live in Colorado and you're at altitude. But now she's 9 months, but since she was a couple months premature, she's essentially like a 7-month-old. She is sitting up. She is talking all the time. She is trying to crawl and usually just ends up face planting on the floor, which, makes us look like awesome parents. Then she's just always curious, looking around, and just the picture you see on there, she's reaching out and touching the bird, and the bird would keep biting her fingers, and then she would just reach back up and keep trying to do it again. So she's just very curious, and we are probably going to try to go another round in January. The doctors here are all thumbs up, enthusiastic, saying that would be all right, and we're going to give the other 9 embryos we have left a chance to come join our family. I think that's about it.
All right, thank you guys so much. I love all the pictures that you shared too, and the stories about Eleanor. She's a cutie. So I will go ahead and have our last family of the night. Let me click over to the slides. So next up we have Terry and Jason. Let me get that going. Okay. Terry and Jason both adopted actually 2 PN embryos after entering the Snowflakes program, and we're very excited to have them go ahead and share their story. So thank you, Terry and Jason, for joining us, and you can go ahead and get started.
Sure, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, we're Terry and Jason. I'm 35 and Jason is 37. We live in upstate New York with our adorable little 3-year-old Boston Terrier, Toby. Right there, you can see him. We met in 2002, and we started dating a year later. We were upfront with each other in the very beginning of our relationship that we both had issues with possible fertility, and we just kind of wanted to be open and upfront with each other about that. And in our conversations about it, we both agreed that should the time come, if we should get married down the road and want kids, and and we had trouble, we were all about adoption. So we knew from the very beginning that it was something that might possibly cross our path. Anyway, we dated for 7 years, got married in May of 2010. But we waited for a little bit before trying to have a family. We're both musicians, and we figured, we would kind of focus on that a little bit more and see where we could go with it. And time would tell when we wanted to try to have a family. But unfortunately, let's see, in December of 2012, Jason had a heart attack, which he's fine now, but it really made us rethink things in life and kind of reprioritize things like our lifestyle, our attitudes towards health and awareness. It made us kind of refocus our attention on family and friends, and it also really made us think about kids. Here we were thinking we would kind of wait it out, and all of a sudden, the priority shifted. And with our puppy in tow, and we were ready to start a family.
In fairness, we locked ourselves in the studio for a really long time. We forgot about the outside world and so on. We got our puppy kind of reminded us that there's an outside world.
Yeah, we were very into our music for a very long time, and we have our own professional studio. So it was our life outside of our jobs. So like Jason was saying, this whole event that happened in our lives really kind of shook us up. So, blessing in disguise, in a sense, really made us refocus our life. So anyway, a few months after the heart attack, we decided to start trying to conceive. We were very healthy at that point, and we tried. I had actually gone to my doctor's right beforehand to make sure everything was okay. And I had actually had a long history since teenagehood of having PCOS. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I went to the doctor, and right before we started to try, and my doctor said, "This is amazing. Your PCOS is pretty much gone." So we attributed it to the new healthy lifestyle and kind of being more active, and so that was great, and we felt really excited about that. So we started trying to make our own family, and things weren't working. So about half a year later, we decided to get Jason tested. And so after two tests, his urologist came back and said, you have azoospermia, which for those who don't know what that is, it means your body has no sperm, which was heartbreaking for both of us. And I mean, it really solidified the idea that there was no chance that we could ever become pregnant naturally with our own children. So, you know, it took a little bit of coping to figure that out and deal with that. But honestly, it didn't take that long because we had already talked years ago about adoption. So we decided, hey, let's go into this. Let's figure this out. What do we need to do and who do we need to talk to? Where does this all begin? So we started contacting adoption agencies. We started talking about the different types of adoptions that are out there with domestic adoption, international adoption, foster parenting. There were just so many options out there. It was pretty overwhelming. And we did make some phone calls. We did some research. We kind of had the ball rolling, decided that maybe we would try domestic adoption and see where we could go with that. But before we got too far into that, we decided to just meet with a fertility doctor one more time. We had actually not met with a fertility doctor yet, but we wanted to meet with one just to make sure we had kind of, you know, turned over all the stones and all the leaves and was there anything we were missing? You know, any kind of way we could become pregnant, something we didn't know about. We didn't want to do anything invasive for Jason, like any kind of exploratory surgery or anything like that. We didn't want to have to go with the donor sperm route. And our fertility doctor knew all this, and she also knew that based off of tests and scans that I had done, that my system seemed fine, that I could carry, that, you know, based off of what she could tell. There was no guarantee. But she was the one, the fertility doctor here in Rochester was the one that suggested we look into snowflakes or just embryo adoption in general. And most fertility clinics around actually have waiting lists, which we didn't know about. So we put ourselves on the waiting list at number 24 just to find out that they really only find a family, you know, one family a year. So not that I would be able to even carry a child in 24 years. So we decided to really look into the snowflakes option, which is, you know, the agency that our doctor recommended we look into, knowing our, you know, what we wanted, our faith background and all of that, and things that, you know, we wanted to know the family. We wanted to be able to have some kind of, I don't want to say control, but some kind of knowledge of the, you know, where the embryos are coming from. We wanted the donor families to know who we were. It was important to us on some level. So in the efforts to really kind of move forward with this, we just jumped right on board. And we sent in our application to Snowflakes on April 23rd. What you're seeing there on the slide, that's actually from our family profile book. We had actually sent out requests to some family and friends to be involved, and we wanted to create a little note for the genetic families to know just how many people in our lives were excited for us to have a family and wanted a little baby. And so anyway, that's what that slide is.
In all fairness, there's more people that are excited about this than just what's there.
There's many people excited. These were close family, very close friends who we kind of let in on our little secret while we were, you know, going through the process. So anyway, we sent in our application to Snowflakes in April of 2014. We were matched by October 15th. And in the meantime, you have to go through the home study and adoption counseling and education, which is taking webinars like this, which Jason and I were so grateful to do. We learned a lot of things from it. It actually changed our opinions on open adoption. That was a big thing for us. We actually thought we would want to close adoption to begin with, but after all the webinars and education and counseling we went through, our hearts were totally changed, and we wanted an open adoption in the end. So anyway, we did all of that in the meantime, you know, while waiting for a match. And another part of the issue for us was that being in New York State, we had a feeling, we had a pretty good feeling that we would be matched with a family that was not in New York. And New York State has these laws that, without getting into too much detail, they make it pretty difficult to get frozen embryos transferred from any other state in the country into New York State. So we eventually were matched with a family in Michigan. And in order to make it easy and affordable for us to do this, instead of flying back and forth to Michigan or driving, which would have been almost an 8-hour drive each way, we decided to find a fertility clinic that was within a reasonable driving distance to where we were, and we ended up in Hershey, Pennsylvania. We had actually interviewed about 25 different clinics over the phone before settling on this one. And in talking with the doctor there, he had actually told us in the beginning, that should we be matched with a family, he actually has had a lot of success with 2PN embryos and day 3 embryos. So it wasn't as if we had a choice, but he was just letting us know that this is, my background, and our team has had a lot of success with these younger embryos. So needless to say, we were matched with a family in Michigan who had 7 2PN embryos that were frozen in 2010. The genetic mother was in her late 20s. I'm in my mid-30s. The doctor was very excited about that too. But he was mostly excited the fact that they were 2PN. He was really optimistic about that. In fact, we had no idea that 2PN or day 3 embryos were actually considered risky at all, ever. We went into this, with our hearts open and our minds clear, and we wanted to give these embryos a chance. We wanted a family, but we were also very aware of what our doctor was recommending. So these 2PN embryos, he explained to us, were in his opinion easier almost to work with, because thawing them at that stage, it allows them more time to incubate and grow in their controlled environment before transfer or refreezing. And so, we said, okay, let's go with this. This is great. We accepted our adoption agreement, and in December we had our embryos shipped from Michigan to Hershey. We had to go down to Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is about a 4.5-hour drive, a few times. And the last time we went before the actual transfer was for a test run, just to make sure the doctor, they have to know where everything is with the uterus, and then make sure that all signs, point to go. You got the green light, and he gave us the date of January 14th as our transfer day. So our plan at that time, he had explained to us that what he wanted to do was thaw all 7, which sounds like it's a pretty common thing from the other families that we're talking to. So we thawed all 7 with the idea of transferring 2, and then what the other ones that remained we would refreeze and come back for later in time to continue our family. So with January 14th looming ahead, we started all the medications. We did everything we had to do. I had to go through a minor uterine surgery to get rid of a polyp in between, but those are just little minor bumps in the road. And eventually my transfer day was pushed a week to January 21st, since my body wasn't ready yet. But once it was, we went down to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I remember sitting in the room with Jason, and the doctor came in and explained to us what had happened and what to expect. So we had these 7 2PN embryos that had been thawed and incubated for a few days to reach the blastocyst stage. And what he explained to us was that during the thaw, 2 of them had disappeared or disintegrated, actually, during the thaw. 2 of them stopped growing and died during the incubation. So that left 3 embryos left that were still growing. But only one of those was actually what they considered strong and viable. The other 2, they weren't too sure about, where they were going to end up and if they would be okay. They had actually recommended at that point that maybe we just transfer the strong one, the one that was doing really well, and leave the other 2 to continue incubating for another 24 hours. But Jason and I made the decision even before we got there that we wanted to transfer 2. We wanted to leave there with 2. And it didn't seem like there was much hope for the other 2. And so we told the doctor, let's stick with our original plan. We will take, we'll take 2. We'll take, the one that's doing really well and one that's not. and we'll let God decide. We'll let that all kind of work its way out in the way it's supposed to be. And we'll let the one that has not reached blastocyst stage yet incubate for another 24 hours. And so that's what we did. And then we got the phone call the next day, 24 hours later, from the doctor. We were still in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and the doctor told us that that third embryo did not survive. So again, we were pretty heartbroken. We were, just 24 hours out of our transfer, knowing that we had 2 embryos inside me, but not sure if they were surviving, if they were going to, hold on for dear life. We didn't know what we were in store for. So we just prayed a lot. We have a really strong family here, a lot of friends. We didn't tell too many people what we were doing because we knew that if something didn't work out, it would be kind of heartbreaking to have to tell everybody. So we told our close family and our very close friends, and we had a very strong support system. And then had our beta test 12 days later, and it was positive. And then 2 days later after that, another positive. And I don't know, the rest is history. Here we are, 27 weeks and 5 days pregnant. We've got 3 months to go before we meet our little one. We're not finding out the gender until baby's born. We just think it's a little more exciting that way. Although our in-laws and our friends wish they knew the gender. But this has been a very healthy pregnancy. No complications whatsoever. Honestly, I couldn't ask for better. I've never been pregnant before, so I don't have anything really to compare it to other than other people's stories. But, some minor swelling, some aches and pains here and there, very mild nausea in the beginning. I mean, these are just kind of just the building blocks of a healthy pregnancy. But again, we were very blessed to have a healthy pregnancy with this one remaining embryo. That, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but that one remaining embryo that did survive, that we're pregnant with now, was actually the lowest graded embryo from the original embryology report. So when those 7 embryos were frozen back in 2010, the embryologist back then, 5 years ago, graded each one separately. And this one actually had the lowest grade out of all 7. And yet here it is, the survivor, strongest one, the one we can't wait to meet in 3 months. So it just really goes to show that not only are 2PN embryos okay, but even low-grade embryos can be beautiful and great and strong.
And they can be pirates.
Well, so in the embryo image that we got when we went for the transfer, it was hilarious. We were actually standing there, and it really looked like an eye patch over over the embryo. So we have a few little monikers for the baby right now, one of which is Yarg, as in what the pirate says. And, so anyway, it's pretty cute. But that's where we are. We're 7 months pregnant and with a happy, healthy baby. And there we are.
For the record.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, and I know you're really excited to finally meet your baby too, of course. So I am going to go ahead and, because I know you guys, well, at least 2 of the families have kiddos that are needing to go to bed or possibly stay in bed, and I'm going to go ahead and open up this time for the questions and answers. So I'm just going to leave it on this slide for a couple seconds. If you want to, we already have a couple questions coming in, so if you want to enter any other questions that may have come up to your minds while you were listening to these stories, then go ahead and enter them now. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share about an upcoming event that we have. Next month, we're going to have, actually, we're going to be representing Grieving the Loss of a Genetic Child. This was a very, very popular webinar when we shared it back last year, towards the end of the year. And so this webinar actually shares quite a bit about the emotional impact about, of infertility and how that can be emotionally devastating, as a lot of these families have shared tonight. And a lot of times you don't necessarily get the chance to look into the psychological impact and how to grieve that loss of having a genetic child so that you can go on and adopt children or adopt embryos. So we're going to have Chris Probasco sharing on the role of genetic connections in parenthood and how families can properly grieve that loss so that they can prepare to adopt. And then we also have a magazine, if you're not aware of it. It's our latest educational tool, Pathway to Family, and we will actually be having a new edition coming out next week, so keep an eye out for that. But right now you can check out the magazine at pathwaytofamily.org. So I'm going to go ahead and
this is Kimberly, but the new edition came out today. And it's all about open adoption. And so I'd encourage you to go to pathwaytofamily.org and read the most current edition online. If you want a paper copy, just contact us. We'll send you one.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions, and everybody can just share as they have an answer. So the first question we have from Megan is, were your embryos allowed to develop to day 5 or 6 before your transfer? So whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, this is Terry and Jason. Yes, our 2PN embryos were thawed, and they were allowed to develop to day 5. And that's when we had planned on transferring day 5 blastocyst. So that's what we did.
Awesome.
And this is Joshua. And ours were kind of the same thing. They were 2PNs that were thawed, and they let them grow to day 5, and so they were. We went through the procedure on day 5 for the embryos.
This is Angela. That's what happened to us as well. We thawed at day 3, and they were grown to day 5. So it just kind of went that way, and they transferred on day 5.
Right, and that's just one of the nice things for a lot of the clinics, that they can actually just go ahead and incubate the embryos and watch them grow in their own environment. So that's really good for them too. All right, so our next question is, one of the attendees says, thank you for your inspiring life stories. We are considering embryo adoption as well and are wondering how you plan to tell your children and when.
This is Angela. We actually took the advice of Snowflakes and created a book for each of our kids, and we actually did it through, I don't remember if it was Snapfish or Shutterfly, but we kind of created a baby book, and throughout that book discussed the whole story of us adopting them as what Snowflakes refers to as seeds. And then we created books that kind of detailed where they came from. In our case, our genetic or our donor, our adoptive family was a single father, and he lives in Paris, France. So we detailed all of that information, that he got an egg donor here in America, and so there was we had a lot to discuss. But we also had their genetic siblings that are in Paris, and then our children that we lost early on that are now their heavenly siblings. So we wanted to make sure all of that was really clear, and they're actually picture books with pictures throughout the book that we created to describe it to them, and we read them to them periodically.
Mm-hmm.
This is Kirsten. We actually really like your idea of the book. We may end up doing that, but for right now, our daughter is, essentially 7 months old, and we're just, right now, while she can't understand me, I'm kind of practicing how to tell her in really simple terms, just, about how God chose her for us, and she was frozen, and the doctor warmed her up and put her in my tummy, and I'm working on how to say it very simply, and then just growing that story as she grows older so that she always kind of knows. There's not a moment of surprise. But just letting that story get more complex as she's able to understand it more. But I also do like the book idea, too.
Yeah.
It's Terry, and I love that book idea. I think that's great. Jason and I are both nodding our heads over here saying, wow, we should really do that. We've got time to work on that. Our our social worker who did our home study with us, she actually helped us a lot in figuring that out, and we've actually already started telling baby in utero, you know, his or her story. So it's just, I guess, you know, to each their own, but we've been told and we've been encouraged to start early. So we figured there's no better time than now so that we get our practice in, and maybe by the time baby's born, we'll actually have a, you know, a good story.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we actually have a couple different webinars on that subject as well. We have a couple webinars on how to tell the kids specifically, and then we have a webinar on creating a book. We call them a life book. And so we created recently just a whole webinar on that for how to create a life book and different ideas for, you know, whether a family likes to scrapbook or really likes to make it simple and just use pictures from Facebook or whatever you have. So I can actually include that on the follow-up information in case if anybody wants to check that out. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, and so I am going to go ahead and close up the webinar a little bit early, which will be nice for the parents especially, so they can go ahead and take care of those kids, and hopefully the triplets have gone to sleep by now. So, all right.
Not quite, but that's okay.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and let you guys go, and thank you so much, everybody, for attending tonight. I hope that it was all great information for you as you consider adopting embryos in the future. So I hope you all have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.